Up to this point, most of the armor that we've been discussing has been defensive. The shield could be used offensively, but it's primarily a defensive weapon. You can't win a battle, though, only by defense. You eventually have to go on the offense. Fortunately, we also have an offensive weapon, a sword. Ephesians 6:17 says to take up the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. If you look carefully, you might notice that the wording is a little bit different here than it was for the other pieces of armor. We had the shield of faith, where the shield was faith, and the helmet of salvation, where the helmet was salvation. However, when we come to the sword, it says the sword of the Spirit, then goes on to describe it, which is the Word of God. So why the difference in wording? I think it's because Paul wanted to stress that the sword belongs not to us, but to the Spirit. He gives it power, not us. So what exactly is a sword? It is the Word of God. Or to put it another way, the sword is what is spoken by God. Because what we have in the Bible is God's message to us. We often call the Bible the Word of God. That's the best weapon that we have. Remember this, the sword of the Spirit is the Word of God, not the word of me. You may have heard of the so-called word of faith movement that teaches that when we speak a word, if we have enough faith, that God is obligated to make it happen. However, we need to remember that the sword belongs to the Spirit, not to us. The power is not in our words. It's in God. God's words are more powerful than ours anyway. In fact, in Genesis, we're told that God created everything just by speaking. In Revelation, we can read that Jesus will conquer his enemies with nothing more than his word. Today, his words give us conviction, discerning even the thoughts and intents of the heart, as Hebrews 4:12 says. Just as with all the other pieces of armor, we have to know how to use it. It's dangerous to give someone a gun to carry when they have no idea how to use it. They might cause even more harm that way. That's why Sheriff Taylor would only allow Barney to carry one bullet, and he had to carry it in his pocket. If you don't know how and when to use a weapon, you can do a lot of damage. We can also cause a lot of damage by mishandling the Word of God. So I'll give you 3 tips today to help you use the words of God correctly. First, know the Word of God. Remember when the devil tempted Jesus in the wilderness? How did Jesus respond? He quoted scriptures. But you can't do that unless you know them. You have to read the Bible again and again. It's not enough just to know it, though. You have to understand it, which is the second tip for handling the sword correctly. If we're going to fight the enemy using the Word of God, we better get it right. And this takes study. Third, we need to practice using it. People who take up fencing don't just pick up a sword and start slashing away at their opponent. They have to take the time to learn the art. You might do this by making a list of Bible passages that help with specific situations that you or your friends are going through. You might also want to think about what you would say in certain situations, like when you're tempted or maybe when you're trying to defend your faith with a skeptic. Try to foresee when you might need to use the sword and then learn how to use it in that situation. The sword of the Spirit is a very powerful weapon, but we have to know how to use it correctly. But ultimately, remember that the power is not in us, but in the sword.